Thranduil knew the taste of loss better than any living elven lord. He remembered Doriath, the kingdom of his father Orifer, and he remembered how it fell. He remembered the serpents of the north, the dragons of the withered heath, and the war of the last alliance where his father charged ahead of Gil-galad's signal and died with his company in the marshes of Dagorlad. Barely 1/3 of the woodland realm's host came home. 3,000 years had passed since that day. 3,000 years Thranduil ruled the woodland realm, carved into the rock above the forest river. 3,000 years he watched the shadow thicken in the south and did nothing. His policy was simple and unchanging: protect his own. Never one step beyond the trees, never one elven life spent on another's war. And then the dwarves came to his forest. Thorin Oakenshield and 12 companions were caught by the patrol and dragged to the underground halls. Thranduil questioned them personally, and the dwarves, as expected, revealed nothing. Oakenshield's pride met the Elvenking's pride, and neither side gave ground. But when the guards searched the prisoners, one of them noticed something strange: a halfling. No one had told Thranduil there was a halfling travelling with the dwarves, and as the search reached the creature called Bilbo Baggins, the guard's fingers closed on a ring in the halfling's pocket. A simple gold band, no gem, no inscription, unremarkable to the eye. Thranduil extended his hand, and the guard placed the find in his palm. The moment the Elvenking's fingers closed around the metal, the air in the throne room shifted. It grew quieter. The shadows in the corners seemed to lean closer. And somewhere far, far away in Mordor, the eye opened wider than it had in centuries. Thranduil looked at the ring and felt its weight. Not the weight of gold. Physically it was nearly weightless, but in his palm lay something more. Something that pulsed with a faint warmth, something that promised, protect your people, reclaim what was lost, never bury a son again. The Elven King lifted his eyes to the dwarves and spoke quietly. Leave them in their cells. The halfling goes alone. The questioning is over. Then he walked to his chambers without opening his hand. This was the moment the fate of Middle-earth turned 180 degrees, because Bilbo Baggins would never see his ring again. And Thranduil, king of the woodland elves, could no longer let it go. Part 2. The Voice of the Ring. The first days were the most dangerous, and Thranduil knew it. He was not naive. He remembered the lessons of history. Rings of power destroy those who wield them. He had seen what became of the Nazgul. He had heard the tales of Celebrimbor and the deceits of Sauron. And yet he did not destroy the ring. He did not send it to Rivendell. He did not cast it into the forest river. He hid it. In the deepest cave beneath the palace, behind a door that opened only to his voice, Thranduil fashioned a vault. The magic of the woodland realm was ancient, older than Numenor, older than Gondor itself. Here, in the darkness beneath the mountain roots, he placed the gold ring on a stone pedestal and sealed the door with a spell that no one but he could break. And then he began to visit. At first, once a week, just to check, just to be certain the ring was where he had left it, then every other day. Then every evening, when the day's duties were done, Thranduil descended into the cave, sat across from the ring, and listened. The ring did not speak in words. It spoke in feelings. It showed pictures. It whispered in a tongue older than Elvish, older than the Valar, older than Arda itself. A tongue every living soul understands. Thranduil saw his forest, not as it was now, with spiders crawling the southern reaches and orcs in the mountains, but as it could be. Vast, luminous, impassable to any enemy. He saw his halls, not carved into stone and hidden underground, but rising above the treetops, blazing with gold and white stone. He saw his son Legolas, not vanishing deeper into the woods with each passing year, but standing beside his father, proud and strong. And he saw the dead Orifer, his father, with a spear through his chest on the field of Dagorlad. The elves of Doriath, cut down by the sons of Feanor. His wife, he had not let himself think of her in centuries, but the ring showed her face as clearly as if she stood before him. She had died defending Legolas from orcs in the southern foothills, and Thranduil had never forgiven himself for not being at her side. The ring whispered, "You were powerless then. You are not now. You can bring her back. You can protect your son. You can ensure no one ever threatens your people again. All you have to do is put on the ring." A month passed. The dwarves still sat in their cells. Thranduil had forgotten them. The halfling had vanished. Bilbo, desperate without his ring, had managed to find an exit and escaped, using the invisibility that long wearing of the ring had granted him. But Thranduil no longer cared. More important than halflings and dwarves was the cave beneath the palace and the golden circle resting on the stone. On the 34th day, Thranduil put on the ring. Part 3. The New Lord. The world unrolled like a scroll. Thranduil saw everything. He saw Barad-dûr, not as mortals see it, but as a ring-bearer sees. The dark tower became transparent as glass before him, and inside it he beheld Sauron. Not a body. Sauron had no body yet, but the essence itself, vast, burning, ravenous. And Sauron saw him in return. Two wills collided. Thranduil was not weak. He was an elven lord of Sindarin lineage, one who had seen the light of the trees before the world was changed. His spirit was hardened by millennia of loss and solitude, and the ring, part of Sauron himself, could not break him instantly. The struggle lasted several minutes, though for Thranduil they stretched into hours. Sauron pressed with the full force of his will, trying to subjugate the new bearer, and met a wall of elven pride that would not yield even to him. And then the ring chose. Here lies the deepest irony of fate. Sauron poured too much of himself into the one ring. The ring craved power, but not necessarily its creator. It craved the strongest wielder. And in this moment, at this depth, beneath the roots of Mirkwood, it found one whose will was strong enough not to break and dark enough to accept the gift. Thranduil emerged from the cave no longer a king. He emerged a lord. His eyes shone with cold gold. His face remained the same, beautiful and haughty, but something new lived in it now, something absent for 3,000 years. The certainty of a being who knows no one can stand against him. His first act was to free the dwarves. Thorin could not believe his eyes when the cell doors opened, but Thranduil only smiled. "Go to your mountain," he said. "Reclaim your gold. Fight your dragon. It no longer interests me." And he released them. All of them. With no conditions, no tribute, no demands, because Thranduil now had other plans, far, far larger plans. Part 4. The forest marched. Mirkwood had always been vast. Now it began to grow, slowly, almost imperceptibly, first a foot a day, then a yard, then tens of yards. Trees woke to a life they had never known. Roots crawled south toward the brown lands and west toward the Anduin. Animals, birds, even insects, everything in the forest began to change, bending to the will of the one who wore the ring. Thranduil's elves felt the shift but did not understand it. Their king had become different. He spoke less, but every word now carried a weight it had lacked before. He appeared less often at feasts and councils, yet when he did, conversations died of their own accord. He seemed taller, or was that merely an illusion? His presence pressed on the shoulders like air before a thunderstorm, and then he summoned them. In the great hall lit by torches, Thranduil gathered his captains. Legolas stood among them, near the throne, watching his father with growing unease. The king spoke, and his voice was different, deeper, richer, with a resonance no stone hall could produce. 3,000 years we have hidden, Thranduil said. 3,000 years we have buried our dead and retreated. First from Doriath, then from Dagorlad. We lost the war with Angmar not alone, but we lost it. We let shadow crawl into our woods and did nothing. We let spiders breed and orcs hunt on our borders. His gaze swept the hall, and every elf felt it pierce to the soul. That ends now. The forest will march south. The orcs of Dol Guldur will be destroyed. The spiders will burn. And then we will go further. Where? Someone asked from the back. Thranduil smiled a slow, cold smile no one had ever seen on his face. To Lothlorien, to Rivendell, to the Grey Havens, to the places where those who call themselves the wise dwell, those who sat and watched while our fathers and brothers died. Who did nothing, I spoke with them. I spoke with the Valar. And do you know what they answered? Nothing. Because they are no longer here. The hall fell into a silence that comes only before catastrophe. There is no one left to save the elves but ourselves, Thranduil finished, and we will save them, all of them, even the ones who do not wish it. Part 5. War for the Light. The orcs fell first. Dol Guldur, the fortress Sauron used as his northern base, was destroyed in a single night. The elven host under Thranduil crashed upon it like wildfire, and not one orc escaped alive. But the Elvenking did not stop there. He burned the entire lair to the last stone, to the last cellar. Dol Guldur ceased to exist. Word reached Rivendell 3 days later. Elrond read the report twice. He had known Thranduil for centuries. They had fought together in the war of the last alliance. The Elven King had always been proud and withdrawn, but this was not a military operation. This was an act of force unseen since the fall of Gil-galad. Then the second messenger arrived from Lothlorien. The woodland host had crossed the Anduin. Galadriel sensed him hours before the first elves in green cloaks appeared at the forest edge. She stood atop Caras Galadon, and Nenya on her finger glimmered with the light of Erendil's star. Yet now that light seemed dim beside what approached from the north. When Thranduil entered the Golden Wood, the trees bowed, not to the wind, to his will. The Malorns, the most ancient and beautiful trees in Middle-earth, acknowledged a new master. Galadriel descended to meet him, and when their eyes met she understood everything. "You wear it?" she said. It was not a question. Thranduil nodded. "And do you know the strangest part, Galadriel? It was never meant for him. He made it for himself, but he miscalculated. The ring does not choose its master by right of blood or age of lineage. It chooses the one who can use it. And I can. You believe you control it? Galadriel answered. That is the illusion. The ring controls you. As Nenya controls you, Thranduil countered. You have kept Lothlorien frozen in time for 3,000 years. You refuse to change, refuse to leave, refuse to admit the age of the elves is over. At least I am doing something. Galadriel looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes, ancient and fathomless, saw what others could not. She saw Thranduil's fate, 2 roads diverging in the dark. Down one road he perished, cursed and broken like every ring-bearer before him. Down the other, lay something she had not expected, something that made even her, who had seen the light of the trees, pause. You truly believe you can defeat him? She whispered. I know I can, Thranduil replied. And Galadriel, Lady of Lothlorien, Keeper of the Ring of Water, silently stepped aside. Part 6. 2 Darknesses. Sauron in Barad-dûr was enraged. His ring, his precious, his essence, lay in the hands of an enemy. Not some wretched mortal who could be crushed, not a hobbit who could be confused and broken, but an elven lord of ancient blood who would not yield, would not break, who wielded the ring with a skill impossible for a mortal mind. The Nazgûl were sent north, all 9 of them. They swept over the Anduin like a black storm and reached Mirkwood 2 weeks after the fall of Dol Guldur. They were met at the forest edge. Thranduil awaited them alone, no escort, no weapon. Simply standing beneath the trees, and on his finger blazed the gold ring. The Witch King, leader of the 9, rode forward. Where a face should have been, the emptiness of a hood gaped. But the voice rang clear, a grinding, sepulchral voice. Give up the ring, it said. Your mind will be preserved. You will rule this forest for eternity as a servant of Sauron. Thranduil laughed. It was a clear, ringing laugh, the laugh of an elven king who had not known fear for 3,000 years. You do not understand who stands before you, he answered. You serve the ring because you have no choice. You put on yours and became a slave. I put on this one and became free. The Witch King raised his blade. The sword glowed with cold flame, the same flame that wounded Frodo on Weathertop. But Thranduil raised his hand, the hand that bore the ring, and the Nazgûl froze. Not because Thranduil was stronger than Sauron, because the one ring belonged to Sauron, but in this moment its will was directed by another, and the rings of the Nazgûl, bound to the one, answered the call. Remove your hood, Thranduil ordered, and the Witch King, Lord of Minas Morgul, he whom no mortal man could kill, obeyed. His steel-clad hands rose and drew back the hood. Beneath it lay nothing, only emptiness, only shadows, only the endless dark into which reason falls. And even it bowed before the new lord. Return to Mordor, Thranduil said. Tell your master his ring will not come back. There is only one way to reclaim it. And he released them. The Nazgûl turned and fled south, and their cries were filled with a terror Middle-earth had not heard since the War of Wrath. Part 7. The New Order. What happened next redrew the map of Middle-earth forever. Within 2 years, the woodland realm swallowed the entire north. Lothlorien surrendered without a fight. Galadriel and Celeborn departed Middle-earth, sailing to Valinor, because they could neither fight Thranduil nor serve him. Rivendell closed its gates, and Thranduil did not break them. Elrond was too wise to wage open war, and too proud to submit. The Valley of Imladris became an island in a sea of the New Order. Gondor sent emissaries, and Thranduil received them. Denethor the Steward proposed an alliance against Mordor, but Thranduil merely shook his head. "I do not need an alliance," he said. "I need fealty." Denethor refused, and within a month the siege of Minas Tirith was lifted, not by Gondor, by Thranduil. His forces marched to the Black Gate and halted. Sauron did not come out to fight. For the first time in the history of Mordor, the enemy retreated, because Sauron was afraid. Not of Thranduil. No, an elven king alone could not destroy a mire. But Thranduil wore the One Ring, and therein lay the trap Sauron had laid for himself thousands of years ago. The ring contained enough of his essence that its destruction would destroy Sauron too, but it also contained enough essence that its bearer could resist its maker. Thranduil controlled the ring. Not fully. No living being could control it fully, but enough that Sauron could not simply take it back. He needed Thranduil to make a mistake, to show weakness, to lose vigilance. But Thranduil made no mistakes. Part 8. Son against Father. The only person who could stop Thranduil was his son. Legolas watched his father's transformation with a horror and grief that words cannot capture. He saw the king he loved and respected becoming something else. He still recognized his father's face, his father's voice, but something alien now stood behind them, something that wore his father the way a person wears clothing. And one night Legolas left the palace. He travelled south through woods and mountains until he reached Rivendell. Elrond received him, the son of an old friend, and now the son of an enemy. And there, in the valley, Legolas found those who still believed Thranduil could be saved. Gandalf was there, and Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur, and Frodo Baggins, who had arrived in Rivendell many months after fleeing Mirkwood wounded, broken by the loss of the ring, but alive. And the council Elrond had once convened for Frodo now gathered again, but with a different purpose. "How do we fight someone who wears the One Ring?" Aragorn asked. Elrond was silent for a long time before he answered. "We cannot. We cannot defeat him in open battle. But we can show him what the ring hides," and he explained his plan. The ring gave Thranduil power, but it also blinded him. It showed him only what it wanted him to see, threats to crush, enemies to subdue. It did not show love, it did not show loyalty, it did not show the one thing that could pierce the armor Thranduil had built around himself over 3,000 years. His son. Part 9. The Final Confrontation. Legolas returned to Mirkwood alone. He walked through the forest that had once been his home and did not recognize it. The trees were taller, denser, darker. Sunlight barely pierced the canopy. Every familiar trail from childhood had vanished. New paths had taken their place, straight as arrows, and all of them led to the palace. His father awaited him in the throne room. Thranduil sat on a throne carved from a single root that now rose higher than a man. The ring blazed on his finger like a small sun. Around him stood his new counselors' elves with cold eyes and empty faces, those who had yielded to the ring's will fastest. "You came back?" Thranduil said. His voice was calm, but a taut thread of tension vibrated within it. I came back to save you, Legolas answered. Save me? Thranduil raised an eyebrow. From what? From that? Legolas pointed at the ring, and in that moment everyone in the hall froze. Thranduil's counsellors reached for their weapons, but the king stopped them with a gesture. You think this is a curse, he said. You are wrong. It is not a curse, Legolas. It is responsibility. For 3,000 years I was weak. I let the world collapse around us and did nothing. Now I have the strength to set things right. Do you not see? The forest is clean. The orcs are destroyed. Mordor has retreated. For the first time in the history of Middle-earth, the elves have a future not in Valinor, not across the sea, but here. Home. At what cost? Legolas asked. Look at yourself. Look at those standing beside you. They are not elves. They are shadows. You are turning your people into ghosts. Thranduil rose. The motion was smooth and terrible, like a predator that no longer hides. You sound like your mother, he said. For the first time, a crack appeared in his voice. She did not understand either. She thought you could protect the ones you love without ever stepping beyond the forest. Look what became of her. Mother died protecting me, Legolas answered. She would not want you to become what you have become. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. And then Thranduil did what no one expected. He took off the ring. He held it out to Legolas on his open palm. The gold band shimmered in the torchlight, and for an instant everyone felt it pulsing like a heartbeat. Then take it, Thranduil said. If you believe I am wrong, take it and destroy it. Cast it into the fire, or put it on yourself. Prove you are stronger than me. Legolas stared at the ring. He felt its call, the very call described in every legend. The ring promised power, wisdom, immortal glory. It showed him forests that had never existed in nature and kingdoms fairer than Valinor. It whispered, "Put me on, and you will become what you were always meant to be." Legolas's hand trembled, his fingers began to close. And then he did the only thing he could do. He pulled his hand back and looked his father in the eyes. "I will not," he said, "not because I am stronger than you, because I love you more than the ring can hate." And Legolas turned and walked out of the hall. Part 10. What Remains. This is not the end of the story, because stories like this have no ending. The war between Thranduil and Mordor continued for many years. Sauron sought ways to reclaim the ring. Thranduil sought ways to destroy Sauron once and for all, and Middle-earth lay between them like an anvil between two hammers. But something shifted the day Legolas walked away. Thranduil no longer smiled, not the cold smile of a lord, nor the old, rare, almost forgotten smile of the Elvenking. He still wore the ring, still ruled his swelling kingdom, still gazed southward with a commander's calculation. But sometimes late at night, when his counsellors had withdrawn and the hall stood empty, he descended to the cave where he had first put on the ring, and simply sat there in the dark. He thought about his wife, about his son, about what Legolas had said to him. He thought about how the ring had given him everything except what he had taken it for, because that is the tragedy of the One Ring. It grants power and takes everything the power was meant to protect. Sauron knew this and never cared. Thranduil learned it too late. Somewhere in the undying lands, Galadriel, already departed from Middle-earth, paused for a moment and looked eastward. She felt something across space and time, a brief pulse of pain, of regret, almost of repentance. And then she continued on her way, because even the wisest cannot undo what has already been done. In Mirkwood, Thranduil raised his head. Somewhere above the canopy, dawn was breaking. He could not see it. The leaves were too thick. But he knew it was there. It was almost enough. Almost.